Hello and welcome to another episode of Unapologetically First Gen. We have our first publicly elected person on our show. This is Luisa. She is a school committee member and an educator who has a union and labor organizing background, which is all of our favorite things right now. And you're also first gen. So
Yes.
you're checking all the boxes.
Yes. So happy to be here.
Stacy and Louisa actually know each other, IRL.
Yes, we met because as I was starting to work on my book, I started talking to different people, and Lisa was one of those people that I started talking to, and we just hit it off.
Yes. I learned a lot from Stacy that a lot of what I was seeing in the schools is not new, and it was great to have a similar but additional perspective on that.
A little validation. You were like, oh, it's not just
Yes.
me doing this. This is like a thing that's happening.
I
Yes.
also really appreciate that Louisa's like in it because I'm like writing my book and I'm like, man, does this book even need to be written anymore? It's been years since I left the classroom. And then I have a conversation with her and I'm like, oh, okay, no, I still have to write.
Really?
Oh, it was probably really great meeting her because it was so validating that what you're seeing is a real thing. But then it's one of those things where it would be nice if you weren't validated and you were like, oh, good, this isn't really a thing.
It's true.
So true.
So, how did you end up joining the school committee?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I have this background in labor organizing, worked with unions in the past as a staff member, which was weird, honestly, because, for example, I did organizing for a call center union, but I had no experience working in a call center. So it felt like a little abstracted. I was trying to organize these workers to improve their working conditions, but I had no lived experience of those working conditions. And that's partly what brought me to work in education, actually, was I wanted to have a direct experience, which I had not had previously. And I also wanted to be a member of a union. I actually applied to Cambridge Public Schools because I was very interested in sort of shifting my career, going into education for real, like getting my licensure, like starting to work as a teacher, seeing where that could take me. And I had heard good things about Cambridge and how they have this educator pathway program and stuff like that. So I was like, great, I'll work here. I applied to be a para. I actually wanted to work as a para in an English language learning type of setting because I speak Portuguese fluently. I knew that like Cambridge had the OLA program. Like I was like, oh, like like people in Massachusetts need people who like speak Portuguese, so like let me apply it in this way. As since I was applying for para jobs, paraprofessionals are what I would consider like contingent staff. They're sort of like the adjunct faculty of public schools. They don't have control over their labor. They sort of are like plugged in wherever is needed. And so that's what ended up happening to me. I applied to ELL, English language learning jobs, but I ended up getting placed in an autism classroom, which was beyond my control. I found out after the fact that at my school that I got hired at, there had been a turnover of 15 paras, which is
Whoa.
insane. I was like, this is a red flag. Like that already to begin with, I was like, what am I getting myself into? um, but and then I did learn like immediately that didn't receive any training. I was put in these unimaginable sort of situations, which I will say I'm extremely glad that the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, I believe is what it stands for. I'm really glad that that exists because a lot of the students I worked with not too long ago would have just been institutionalized and removed from society. So I'm extremely grateful that they were in a public school setting. I was actually shocked that they were receiving an education purportedly, but when I was there, it was, for lack of a better word, shit show. They were still, in my estimation, not receiving that education that they should be. And I was able to see sort of a lot of that from behind the scenes in that role. And by being there in the thick of it and seeing how it could be better, that's ultimately why I decided to run for school committee, because I was like, this could be so much better for these students. And that's a very superficial version of it.
So are you still a para now?
I'm still a para, but I work in Somerville now. Partly because I feel like I was retaliated against in the district. And first of all, I found out from other people that like this wasn't happening just at my school. It seemed like it was pretty common practice at other schools in the district. That's honestly why I decided to run. I feel like I was deeply mistreated in a way that felt similar to how I observed the students being mistreated. And the thing that sort of united us was that I was one of the lowest level employees in the institution. So I was one of the most vulnerable classification of workers there. And the students I was working with, who were nonverbal, non-speaking, autistic children, were also among the most vulnerable students in the school system, and we were both mistreated. And so once I saw that there was like a through line there, that wasn't coincidence, that it was probably sort of by design that this was happening, and the more I heard from other people that this was not an uncommon occurrence. In fact, a lot of people I spoke with, they had already basically lost hope. The feeling that I got was a lot of the people were like, that's just how it is. There's nothing we could do about it. And sort of like, yeah, just came to accept these things. And I was just like, no, this is unacceptable.
Yeah. And the other way where you were just like lit a fire under your ass.
Yeah. But the thing is, like, the only reason I felt motivated to run, which was a huge endeavor and a huge undertaking, is because I met so many people that were like, this sucks, this happened, and it's not okay. And it felt like there was like a movement growing to address these things. And that's why I felt like, I wasn't just running to seek revenge or whatever it was, but like because I felt like it was very clear that it was a part of something greater than myself, that I had the opportunity to help others in a way that a lot of people who are still in the system right now, like in Cambridge Public Schools, like they don't feel comfortable sticking their neck out. And I totally get it, because it was a very the way that I was treated for speaking up was traumatizing, honestly. So I totally get why people don't want to do that. So I figured, I've already been picked off. I feel like I have this responsibility to help people who are still suffering there. And so let me help represent these people.
It's so hard too, because I feel like a lot of the times as a teacher, when I was advocating for things, it was always like, well, it's pretty good here, so you really shouldn't complain because this district is better than other districts. And then there's this other thing of, well, teachers are just selfish. And it's not like anybody's outright saying, oh, you're selfish, but it's the way that like decisions are made, the way that you're perceived. And I think like COVID was a really good example of this, where like teachers went from, oh my gosh, you're amazing, thank you so much, to just like complete whiplash to like, actually just go do your fucking job and don't complain about it, in like a month.
Yep.
And I think it's just so hard, because it's like, it's not really, teachers are like probably the most selfless people I know. Like they are not doing it for themselves. Like every time I was asking for something, it was because the kids needed it.
Yeah.
Like asking for living wages is so that you don't have to work 3 jobs outside of your job, so that you're not showing up super burnt out and you can actually engage and interact with your kids and not in a super cranky, actually do a good job.
Exactly.
On the parent side of things, it's like when teachers ask for school supplies, or when I hear that like
Mm.
teachers paid for their own stuff, it like jars me because I'm like,
Yeah.
why?
Out of
I'm
their
like,
like already low salary, they're wanting to provide snacks for their students.
actually, that's a great example. Like, I know what my property taxes are. And then there was like the day before the last holiday, there was a half day, and the couple of the classroom teachers joined their classes and they wanted to do like a special movie. So they bought their own popcorn and
Mm.
like juice boxes with their own money. Okay, that probably wasn't a ton of money, but what else are you spending your own money on?
Yeah, exactly. It's so true. I've seen teachers basically like create miracles. They make something out of absolutely nothing because they see what their students need and try to provide that despite, like Stacy said, needing to fight with the administration and with like the community sometimes, like to get those things and like to be able to even provide those things on your own. Like sometimes they don't even want you to like do it on your own because you're like overstepping or like not obeying what they're saying or something. So it's like it's crazy that to do that you need to fight it sometimes.
I think teachers need to stop spending their own money and spending their own time, and PTOs slash PTAs, whatever you call them in your school, need to start stepping up and going to teachers and being like, what is it that you need from us? Whether it be supplies, whether it be like, I don't know, my PTO had a day where we made like 100 popsicle snowflakes last fall, um, for an activity, whether it be a day of service, whatever it is that teachers need, they are educating the next generation, and we need to be taking better care of teachers.
It's so true. I agree with that. That Stacey and I have talked about this a little bit too. That in Cambridge, and it seems like this happens in other places too. One of the strategies of the district to like keep people from rioting is to put the parents against the teachers and vice versa. Like I mentioned that like I ran because I felt like it was part of a bigger movement to change things in Cambridge. Part of how I saw that coming up is that this group of educators and caregivers actually were actively seeking each other and trying to come together despite this rhetoric from the district because they were like, wait, actually, we do have more in common than they would like us to think, and we want to come together to do advocacy around these issues so that we can address the systemic root cause of this rather than teachers having to pay for things out of pocket. That's like a band-aid solution. Even PTOs potentially funding things, that's definitely useful, but what is the root cause of why we're not getting the funding that we need?
Yeah.
It's cool that they decided to come together on that, and that showed me like, okay, like people are like head up and want to do something about this. Like they see through what the district is trying to do to divide us. So that was
It
really powerful for me.
It's interesting you saying this. You can be fired for pretty much anything until you're tenured. And so there's this big fear among educators of following every single rule, being super compliant until you're tenured. And then when you're tenured, you can work to rule. You can kind of give a little bit more slack. But until then, you're buying your own supplies. You're doing all of the extra things because you want to keep your job. And I think that there's this level of fear around talking to parents. And I found that where, especially in specific situations, that parents were reaching out, but I felt like I wasn't allowed to even ask for help. I wasn't even allowed to really say anything. There's this strategy behind keeping people siloed, and when you're not talking to other people and when you don't know what's going on and when you're too scared to even like cross that bridge and talk to other people, you're not going to find that common ground. And so you feel really isolated and you feel really alone.
As
Yes.
the parent in this hearing that makes me so sad, because if parents are reaching out to say like, oh, how can I help, or is there anything I can do, it's very genuine, and it's just like heartbreaking to hear that like things are so siloed that it's you could potentially get in trouble for talking to a parent or for reaching out and asking for help. And I
Oh,
totally understand why you would feel that way, but it's just like
If I had told my parents, "Oh, you're pissed off, go to school committee," I would have been retaliated against.
Which is horrible, obviously. It's crazy because like we're trying to teach like students like skills for real life and like how to be like civically engaged, yada yada, but then you can't actually like practice that yourself.
Are there ways that parents can engage with either teachers or the school committee without potentially getting educators in trouble?
That's interesting. Well, I want to think on your question and curious if Stacey has any thoughts about that too. But where my mind is going now is one of the things that Cambridge Public School District is trying to do. It's becoming part of the institution because parents advocated for this is family engagement. They're trying to improve their family engagement practices again because parents like advocated for this for many years. And but like one of the concerns that I've spoken with some parents about is that the district is sort of co-opting these ideas, and yeah, that's sort of a loose thread in my mind right now, but it makes me think of that because it's what are ways that's a really good question, and the way I'm wondering about it is what are ways that we can do that but still avoid the sort of institutional capture of those ideas while still also like protecting ourselves and doing that work of like speaking truth to power and like and pointing at what some of these like issues really are and not sort of like watering them down so that they're palatable for the district. That's one of the things I'm thinking through, honestly, through my role, is how to have these discussions openly with the district, but like still being true to like what got me here, which is the people powered movement of it that doesn't want to be co-opted, but wants accountability.
Right. As you're talking about the district, it kind of feels like the district totally sounds like Starbucks being like, our employees don't need to unionize because we already treat them so good. And if you try to unionize, we're going to shut the store down. That's the district vibe right now.
Totally.
I think it's so tricky too. Some of the things that we've talked about, for example, the PTOs. I know PTOs at some schools make a ton of money and bring it back to their schools where other schools don't have a ton of money.
Yeah.
And that's like another way that it's siloed. I think in terms of what parents can do, one is making sure that your voice is not the dominant voice. How are you ensuring that the immigrant parents, the parents of kids with very severe special needs, the parents who don't have time to come into school events or to attend school committee members, how are those voices being heard and how can you amplify those voices? Because I think what happens is these really well-intentioned good people are coming in and they're like, hey, I want what's best for my kid, but not realizing that what's best for your kid is actually fucking over some other kid because now you're stealing resources and you're resource hoarding. And to explain that is really tricky. I've said this metaphor a few different times. It's like an emergency room. As the educator in the room, you're using what you have to service the people who need it the most and then get to the kids who are regular job. But it's hard when the loudest parents in the room, the ones pushing at school committee meetings and the ones talking to the principal are pushing for specific things that are not necessarily the same priorities as what you have in the classroom.
Yes, I'm really glad that you brought that because that's one of the things I'm definitely encountering and navigating it as well as especially in a wealthy place like Cambridge, people who are privileged, who have the time, who have the political capital and institutional knowledge go and ask, can my kid have this thing? And it is like I usually don't put it this way because people get defensive, but it is like a selfish thing and they're not like thinking about it holistically. And I think that that's why teachers definitely need to be heard because teachers are seeing it from the ground, but like they have like they have a pretty full picture of like, wait, like I can't do this that you're asking me because there's all these other kids that I need to be taking into consideration. It's a pretty like myopic sort of view that like these parents have, and like I think like the sort of like audacity to ask for things and to keep asking for things is just, to your point, Stacey, it's like something I've often thought in Cambridge. There needs to be some sort of like truth and reconciliation process. It's not about you. And people need to like really like take that on. Like
It's got to have like you need a flow chart, and it's going to be like, are you a wealthy white lady? Yes. And then just like, it immediately just goes to like, is it all about you? And they're like,
yeah, it should
no.
be like, your kid is
Like,
gonna be
is it
fine,
all-
actually.
yeah. Your kid will be okay.
Yeah, like
Does your kid
you're good.
require like special needs, any special accommodations, like per a professional recommendation? No, your kid will be fine.
Yeah, exactly. See the bigger picture. And that's part of what's rough about Cambridge that I heard a lot. Like I'm not a parent in the district, so I don't have this experience firsthand as a parent. But what I heard from a lot of parents during my campaign was we have this controlled choice lottery system, and apparently parents talk, like wealthy parents talk to each other at the playground. Oh, like how are you gonna get the school that you want? How are you gonna game the system to get the outcome that you want? And people feel entitled to that clearly, I don't know, to me I think that requires a community-wide reckoning moment, but I don't know how that's gonna look per se. A big part of what I'm trying to do to rectify that, like in the absence of there being this huge reckoning moment, it's like to go more to these families and like these staff people who like are not being heard and who are like afraid to speak up and try to like seek out their perspectives specifically. And like to the PTO thing, someone emailed me on my school committee email. He was like, you should really push for this district wide PTO in part to break these silos and to, like Stacey was saying, like some wealthier PTO at one school like raises a lot of money, they can distribute it equitably across the district, things like that. Partly that myopic view comes from we live in a very segregated society. People don't want you to know your neighbors. People don't want you to know what other people are struggling with. If I can help break those things down, I think can move the conversation in a different direction, hopefully.
I think it's hard too when you're looking at like big organizations like a school, like an urban school district, and you're thinking about cultural change, because at the end of the day, it is cultural change. All of these policies are informed by the culture, and that change is so slow and so bureaucratic. Honestly, my biggest lesson leaving schools is how corporate schools are.
Yes. As a teacher, or in my case, like as a parent, where I'm working directly with a kid, I see that child, and child is like my whole world in that moment. That sounds weird, but what I mean is that that is taking up all of my attention. And so I get to really know that child's humanity. But then when it becomes this bureaucratic thing that is dealing with people, it suddenly becomes so impersonal and almost loses that humanity that is why a lot of us are there for.
I think that's what makes it feel so bureaucratic, is that there is no humanity in it. You were voted in, so like people have expectations for you. Otherwise, you're not going to be voted in next time. And you're talking about having to like make alliances so that your votes can pass. And then are the people you're making alliances with, now they expect you to vote a certain way. And then you're like, I'm here for a very specific reason. I have very specific goals in mind. And
Mm-hmm.
your goals center around the humanity of the students, but the agenda of the whole thing centers around the district, centers around an entity. And that's
Yeah,
what makes
that's
it corporate.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that because that's one of the things that's been very challenging. So the school committee is the elected governing body of the district. If you do think of it as a corporation, it's like it's the board of directors of that organization. And so we are supposed to like determine policy, and we also oversee the superintendent. So we're the superintendent's boss technically. But it's interesting how in Cambridge, and I'm not sure if it's like this in other places as well, that has become totally warped where the school committee that's elected is there to in the last many years has only really served as like a rubber stamp for whatever the superintendent or the district wants to do. But that's why this last election was so incredible, was that there were a lot of people there that were actually, those days are over and we're actually going to do what our job is supposed to be, which is like policy for the district, keep the superintendent accountable, things like that. But in practice, that's been really crazy because superintendent and like, well, like admin in the district obviously don't want to give up that
Right.
power and that control. And so they sort of talk circles around us and make us sort of fall in line. After the first few meetings that we've had, I'm in a regrouping moment where it's like, okay, how can I actually fight against these things in this political way? Which is definitely a whole thing to navigate.
I've done a lot of community work, which means I've had to deal with a lot of politicians. And the thing is, they're really good at talking circles. And
Yes.
sometimes you're chatting and or you're in a meeting and they're talking and you're like, yeah, this sounds good. This sounds good. And then you walk away and you're like, did they actually say anything?
I think
Exactly.
too, I think something that's important to bring up is that there are all these like rules and it's like very rigid system. And as you get lower down in power, like teachers, there's a lot of rules around evaluation and about like what you need to be doing. But depending on who is navigating the system, those rules either bend or stay really, really strict. And
Mm.
so that's where it gets like really tricky because you're like, well, hey, I need help. And they're like, but these are the rules. But then if you look at past school committee members, or I don't want to name specific situations, but you can see, hey, maybe the rules have bent a little bit. Maybe you guys got away with some stuff that was very illegal.
Yeah,
And just nothing happens because it's fine, because they have the power and they're the ones governing themselves. It's very frustrating.
it really is. It's definitely like a mind fuck. Because I'm also just some guy who got elected, is how it feels sometimes. I was just a worker in the schools and I saw how things were and then I was motivated to run. Now I'm here. And I think this is sort of where the first gen stuff comes up for me too. I definitely see and feel the ways that just because of my identity and how I show up in the world, which is not in my control, I did not choose this body. I didn't choose to go through life as a woman, as an immigrant, but these are things that have conditioned me. And people will treat me with these like biases that they have. And it's really crazy to see that in this space because I am in a position of like authority and like respect. People like call like are supposed to refer to me as like member de Paula Santos. It's supposed to be like this very honorable thing, but I'm still dismissed and not taken seriously. My opinion is not sought out for certain things, and that definitely comes from how I show up in the world. There's this picture in the school committee room that's a previous school committee in the 60s or something, and it was like all these white men and they were like racist and sexist. This is the oldest school board in the country, and so like carries this whole baggage in just even the way that it's convened. that's part of what I'm trying to like address, even just by like, being there too. They have to like reckon with certain things because I'm there. I'm navigating that and trying to like use it to best effect, and strategically.
Yeah, just you being there is already radical without you bringing in your crazy, why don't we think about the students first goal?
Exactly.
I will say, I think I've said this on the podcast before, but I think one of the saddest things about the way schools have evolved is the loss of community. My mom was in my classroom every single morning. She helped us with morning work every single morning. She was friends with the teachers. She's still in touch with some of my elementary school teachers. I think that there's something about like being first gen and having these community values, which is I think a big reason of why you got elected and why you're in that position in the first place. I appreciate that you are doing the work.
Aw, thank you. And I appreciate that people, like you said, I definitely could not have done it alone. People believed in me, and I really do take that seriously. And I'm like, how can I represent people to best effect and really have that in mind every time that I'm making a decision or in a room, making sure I represent that. And I think to your point, it's like, yeah, I feel like schools that's also why the culture thing we were talking about earlier, how there's some of this toxic culture, and like these toxic practices in how people are treated in schools. That's what makes it feel more urgent because schools are communities. If there's toxicity to school, that is going to affect everything. It's going to trickle down to the kids. Kids are going to know that there's bad vibes there. They're not going to be able to learn properly. We need to really value and honor schools as community institutions, and hopefully think through those like culture problems with that lens. That's sort of the thing that I'm trying to bring constantly to the table. You need to act on this because it's having an effect on the students like well-being and their futures. Like it might seem trivial to you as like CEO of this organization, but like matters, and like really bringing that back at every moment. And then hopefully like actually bringing people who are affected by that into the space as well to be able to like that story and like paint like a bigger picture about that.
This is your first year on school committee?
Yes, I
And
literally started January 5th, so 2
okay,
months
so
into it.
so you're like 2 months in almost.
Yeah.
And then how long is a term?
2 years, which is not that long.
No, it isn't. You're basically going to be campaigning like in a year. The reason I ask is I think this conversation was really interesting and I feel really inspired to work harder at making my kids' school more community based. Um, but I would love it if we could have you back at like the end of your 2 years to talk
Ooh.
about essentially have a similar conversation, but talking about essentially how did it go your first time on school committee, especially around reaching these goals of helping these students, helping these marginalized families. And I think it would be really cool to talk about this idea more of how do we continue to build the communities that center around our
Yeah, this will also like keep me accountable to trying to actually move on this stuff.
we'll just periodically send you this episode.
Yeah.
We'll schedule emails for like every 3 months with just clips of this episode. And you'll be like,
You
oh
said
God,
this.
it's been 2 years. I gotta get things done. Not to your constituents, to us.
Yeah. To be fair, I am her constituent.
Oh, that's true. You are her constituents and our listeners. And do you really want to disappoint me after you've inspired me?
Luisa, what makes you unapologetically you?
I think, well, I love this. Yeah, I think what makes me unapologetically me is that I definitely want like justice in the world. And I want like yeah, all people to be treated with dignity and respect. And I want to, make sure that systems are changed to be to be able to make sure that there is that dignity and respect for all people. I'm someone who, especially if I've been wronged or if someone that I really care about has been wronged, I will put myself on the line to make sure that uh, situation is figured out. And so I'm glad that in such a crazy way has brought me to the school committee in Cambridge. I feel like I'm unapologetically fired up and will always be.
I love that.
I love that. My favorite thing about when asking people what makes them unapologetically them, it's so nice to hear everybody say something really amazing about themselves.
Oh, yeah, it's a nice opportunity to reflect.
And with that, thank you so much, Luisa, for coming on and talking all things school, because I can go on forever and ever about all things education related. If you want to stay in touch, Luisa does have a website. You can also catch her live at all school committee meetings in Cambridge.
Yeah, if you live in Cambridge, you're my constituent. I want to represent your perspectives, so definitely reach out and let's talk. Especially if you're afraid of like bringing your perspective up, which I totally get. I will try my best to keep your identity private, but definitely please like reach out to me. I want to be able to help. Um, yeah, you can reach me at Louisa for School Committee at gmail.com. School committee it's like a really long and convoluted and hard to spell, but like hopefully you'll be able to find me. I would say you could also reach out to me at my like official email, but I think if you have like privacy concerns, do not do that.
Fair enough. We will also put that in the show notes. So if you're listening and you want Lisa's email, you can check it in the show notes. With that, thank you again, Lisa, for coming on. Thank you to our listeners, and don't forget to follow, subscribe, leave a review, and share with your unapologetically first gen friends. Till next time.